With the way Renzo and I work, it's looking at the design, it's feeling the emotional connection that we have to that design and then going from there. And for me, it was very important to remember my childhood, which was sort of, my family always had BMW cars, and I remember when I was a little kid, just waiting for mom and my dad to come home and sort of sitting on the windowsill and listening to the cars go by because I could identify exactly which one was my mother's or my father's car. So there was an emotional connection about coming home. When I heard that car, everything was safe. And that was a really lovely feeling.
We are here today to talk about sounds, about how sounds shape our experience, and about a new revolution in car design. But not physical design, but rather the design of sound, and specifically the BMW iconic Sounds Electric, designed by the legendary composer Hans Zimmer with pianist, composer, and sound designer Renzo Vitale. Together they have developed a positive soundscape for the future of mobility, and very exciting it is too. Hans Zimmer has scored more than 200 projects across all mediums, which combined have grossed more than $28 billion at the worldwide box office. He's been honored with an Academy Award, 2 Golden Globes, 3 Grammys, an American Music Award, and a Tony. Since 2017, Renzo Vitale has designed the sounds of the BMW Group's electric vehicles. He conceived a new generation of sounds through a novel approach that he calls sound genetics. In his current role as creative director, Sound BMW, Mini and Rolls-Royce, he is working with Hans on BMW iconic Sounds Electric. Edith Bowman, welcome, has worked as a TV and radio broadcaster for over 20 years and looks at music from a wider cultural perspective. Her radio work has spanned all the major stations, presenting shows on LBC, BBC Radio 1, 2, 6 and 5 Live, as well as Virgin Radio. She has an award-winning podcast, Soundtracking, and more recently, she has begun hosting Play Next, a podcast series created in partnership with BMW, exploring the future of music, new artists, new media, and new possibilities. Hans, can I come to you first? Obviously, the role
Certainly.
of sound in film goes beyond language, helping to shape characters and elicit emotion. How does the approach change when there are no visuals?
But there are always visuals, even when you dream there are visuals. You have visuals in your head. But it's really the idea that sound in its purest form is a way of sort of opening doors to your emotion, and there's some sort of sense of emotion that automatically gets unleashed with sound. Plus, you have to remember, sound is 360 degrees. Eyes just look straight ahead. We have stereoscopic vision, but we have surround sound always.
So, Renzo, how do you go about creating a poetic experience that elevates what you're doing, including driving?
Well, I think it always begins from the search of beauty. And it is something that I believe I've inherited from my country, from Italy, where there are plenty of poets and artists in the past, from Dante to Michelangelo and Leonardo, and they were always looking at things, searching for beauty. And I think this approach has affected me very much, and I try to bring that also in an environment which is the automotive industry, where the idea of poetry is not that present usually. And I think that sound gives us this wonderful opportunity to bring poetry also within what it's called a machine. But if we think that behind this machine there are thousands of humans that create this super intelligent, what I like to call it, performative art installation, that's where the beauty comes in, and that's where we like to think of the driver as a performer that interacts with this newly designed instrument.
Now, Edith, you've obviously interviewed a lot of composers and musicians over the years. What have you learned from them regarding the relationship between sound and emotion?
Well, what's interesting is the different approaches that different composers have with, and the relationship they have with the film and when they come on board. I was lucky enough to speak to Han and Christopher Nolan, for example, about Interstellar, and the way that Hans was almost kind of crafted the narrative of the film for Christopher through the sounds that he created with that fabulous organ, just an incredible score. And I think that it's about not speaking for the audience through the sounds. It's about providing the audience with, I guess, going back to what Hans was saying about the imagination, almost an extension of their imagination with what they're seeing.
Right.
But it's a beautiful synergy and something that I think works as well on its own without the pictures, because listening to soundtracks without the film there can be a very different experience, but an extremely rewarding experience as well. And that's been fabulous to explore with the composers that I've spoken to.
Well, often a good movie soundtrack will live on longer than the movie.
Absolutely. And a good, a bad movie soundtrack can ruin a movie as well. So, it's an important part of the process. And
Sure.
I think something that more and more people are recognising and celebrating as well.
Hans, I want to ask you about iconic sounds in particular. Two questions. What kind of sounds convey movement? And what ingredients we used in iconic sounds to achieve this?
Iconic sounds. Well, of course, everybody wants iconic sounds. I try not to even think about it in those terms. I actually think about it in the terms that I make up little stories in my head. For instance, when Renzo and I started working, I was thinking, grey November day, you got to go to work. It's still half dark outside. It's slightly foggy and it's cold and you're feeling a bit miserable. So what happens? You go to your car, and as you switch it on, as you open the door, there should be a sound that sort of invites you in. There should be a sound that says, today's going to actually be quite a happy day, or something like this. Something that just opens the possibility to feel something a little bit more positive. So those were those sort of sounds. I mean, how to do sounds in motion? I mean, we can do lots of things with rhythm, and we can. Those are easy. It's the ones where you just gently open those doors that tell your driver, your audience in this case, that they have permission to feel something, and maybe that life isn't quite as glam as they thought. The thing that I thought was very interesting at the time when Renzo and I first started to do that was we were talking a lot about what did the world sound like before the Industrial Revolution, when it was totally silent. And of course, with the COVID virus, we suddenly found out the hard way what the world sounded like, in some sort of extraordinary silence. And so the electric car, of course, is silent. And one of the tasks we set ourselves is how can we create a sonic environment that was present and let you think and let you feel and let you create and let you be pleasantly alone with your own thoughts. That seems to have been important to us.
How did the process compare to creating a film score?
Not that dissimilar. Edith mentions the Interstellar, where Chris just told me, I mean, I'm going to make this very short, where he sent me a letter that just had the tiniest of fable that had nothing to do with the actual film. And I wrote a piece that was based on this fable that Chris sent me. And sort of the same happened with the way Renzo and I work. It's looking at the design, it's feeling the emotional connection that we have to that design and then going from there. And for me, it was very important to remember my childhood, which was sort of, my family always had BMW cars. And I remember when I was a little kid, just waiting for mom and my dad to come home and sort of sitting on the windowsill and listening to the cars go by because I could identify exactly which one was my mother's or my father's car. So there was an emotional connection about coming home. When I heard that car, everything was safe. And that was a really lovely feeling. So I thought, that's a good starting point for this, this adventure where Renzo and I are going to go on.
Renzo, in your experience, how does sound evoke memory?
Well, I mean, memories are the story of our lives, and each memory contain several aspects that are capable to trigger us again and to bring that back in time where we experienced those. It's scent, it's image, but it's sound. And as just Hans beautifully said, also sound plays a role in the memory. And this is a beautiful story because I remember the very first day that I met Hans, we spent almost a day together talking about sound in general and then also the potential of creating sound for the cars. And this memory of associating a car to the father was something that I also had, and we resonated immediately, as he mentioned that, because in my case, I remember when I was a children and we were at this house by the sea and we were on the terrace, on the balcony, on a Friday waiting for my father to come back, and you could hear the cars driving from far away. And so we had kind of learned the sound of this very old diesel engine, and when we heard it, we were running down, myself and my brothers going down. And so basically that sound was not anymore the sound of the car, but was more the voice of my father. It was a message. And that's where Hans and myself kind of, one of those moments where we resonate, because we had the same intention of what we wanted to tell in terms of story for the cards. So it's more about creating that emotional connection, because what we are designing now, it's basically the memory of the children of tomorrow.
Fascinating. Renzo, what was your original brief with Iconic Sounds? Were you trying to give the car a voice?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the very first briefing was more like, we need a sound that is capable to fulfill the legal requirements out in the street. So it was more a kind of engineering type of briefing, but that's where I tried to transform this requirement into an opportunity and to expand the idea of sound, mentioning or naming them like iconic sounds. And so I expanded the briefing to aspects that also involve design, that involved the brand identity, that involved the history of BMW, because it's it's 100 years of story, and the sound has to also tell that kind of story. So I tried to bring all this information together on the table, and then trying to define a new framework that is called sound genetics, which is nothing else than defining a structure on how to come from a very abstract concept that we don't even know how it sounds like, up until to an audible and a tangible experience for us all.
Now, Edith, you've obviously had quite a long relationship with BMW, but how did you feel when you first heard Iconic Sounds? Indeed, what does it sound like?
I think it has an incredible transportative quality, and I think that music and sound is the only thing that has that ability, whether it's familiar sounds, so whether it's a song you know, or the sound of the sea, or trees in the wind, or whether it's something that you're hearing for the first time. For me, it has this brilliant kind of double side to it, where it's transportative, but it's also safe. It's got a warmth to it, and it kind of has this sort of futuristicness to it, but still feels very familiar. It's a beautiful kind of warmth to it. So, like when Hans said, when you know, it's a grey day outside, and you've got the day ahead of you. You want to open the car and sit in, and suddenly feel, no, this could actually be a really good day, and it has that ability. And I think that that's the wonderful thing that they've done with this, is the instant kind of transport to a kind of world of possibilities, I guess, as well, from the sound.
Is it a very immersive experience?
Yeah, and it's very personal as well, because I think that if you got in to the car and the sound was there for you, you would have a very different experience or it would take you somewhere or make you feel in a different way that I do. And I think that I have no idea how they were able to do that, but every person, I think, will have a different experience from when they hear it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, because in my experience, a car is a very is a very personal space, particularly when you're the only person in it. And it's become, over the years, the only place I actually listen to music. So it's become even more personal. So does it have a very sort of personal attachment?
Yeah, I think so. It's almost kind of like getting in the car with a friend. And right now we need that connection more than ever. So it's kind of getting in, you hear that sound and your shoulders drop. And you're kind of ready to, listen to your music, go on that journey wherever you are. But I think it's a very clever thing for it to have that unique quality for every person that hears it.
Sure. Hans, can you try and describe how the collaboration with Renzo actually worked? Who did what, and what was your working relationship like?
I can try to describe it, but it might get us fired. Because
yes,
because basically the way we work. I mean, we're both full of ideas, and we both are full of trying to express them, and we love our toys and machines and synthesizers and electronics, and we are very, 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 very geeky. And then ultimately, what we are very passionate about sound as well. So a lot of it is the two of us sitting in a room and just trying impossible things, which I think is important. Try to make impossible things that try to generate feelings that you might never have had before, and figure out how to make sounds that feel that embrace these feelings, and make sounds that just embrace you. And I mean, as I keep saying, I feel it's very important that there is that you leave autonomy to the listener, to the driver, that you do feel, like Edith says, that this sound is just for you. This car is yours, and therefore that environment is very much yours. And so how do we work together? That's how we work together. We try things out on each other. We make sounds. We talk about the impossible, and then we try to push it a little further than just impossible is what the other people do. We go beyond that.
Renzo, how do you see the sound of electric cars impacting upon people psychologically?
Well, there are several ways that this kind of impact will play a role in the upcoming years. First of all, it changes the way we look at cars, because as of now, I mean, we've been used to a common sound, and if you were asking us as children what was the sound of a car, maybe we would have used sounds like brum or vroom, or every country has a similar way of pronouncing that sound. But now we are creating sounds that cannot be categorized anymore in a box. So we have a huge variety. So psychologically, that changes the way we interact also with the car itself. And that brings to the second element, which is going to be essential and very much transforming in the interaction with the car. Because that kind of interaction, the possibility that we have to shape the sound in real time, to morph the sound, and we are giving this possibility to the drivers so that they suddenly can express their emotions by driving. And this is something very much new, because in a future, very close future to come, the driver will have the opportunity to choose between different sounds. And every sound speaks about a different emotional state, emotional condition. So these are the emotional conditions that Hans and I are trying to define, related to a light scape, I would call it, so that it's appearing in the car, and other elements such as scent or other elements that will enhance this experience. So the experience will enlarge extremely, and that has I think an enormous impact on how people will see the driving experience, will see the car tomorrow.
Edith, your podcast has obviously brought you into contact with a wide variety of people from various industries. What have you learnt in the series about people's personal relationship with sound?
It's been really wonderful to shine a light on so many different individual artists, different genres of music, and that's what's, I think, been really wonderful now, where when it comes to music and sound, genre isn't really an important word that's used with music and sounds anymore. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because it means that things can cross-pollinate and generate in a much more fluid way, and the outcome of that can be absolutely wonderful and inspiring. And what I've learned from a lot of our guests was just the constant strive to innovate, the constant kind of want as a songwriter to push themselves to try something new, whether that be in analytical content or whether that be in a technological side of things as well. We also spoke to people like Disclosure, about collaborating and how those collaborations come about, and very important for them to make sure that they're not kind of pigeonholed into being a type of thing to surprise people, to constantly push themselves, and to make sure that they are working with artists that may be unexpected for them as well. So I think that that's the underlying thing that came out of the podcast, was people's want and need to step outside of boxes and to innovate and to push technologies and to try and try different things and to surprise and to encourage people's imagination as well.
Do you think that that is driven solely by technology? Because when you think about music, pop music, say, it used to be kind of analog, and then Kraftwerk came along, a new order, and everything was technologically was driven by boxes. And do you think that's where we are now, that it's all driven by technology?
I think a lot of it, I think technology gives the ability and the opportunity to do more. I think there is nothing better than the in this wonderful venue that we're in, Union Chapel, where I've been lucky enough to see live music being played on numerous occasions. There is nothing better than sitting watching an orchestra play and feeling that power of it physically. But I think that what technology gives us the ability to do, and particularly in this world that we find ourselves in, is still to connect in a way, whether that is through creating music or whether that's through communication. And I know that Hans has been working on, normally multiple scores at one time, and he wouldn't be able to create if the technology wasn't there for him to connect with orchestras in other parts of the world to finish these wonderful creations. So in that sense, technology is pushing things. A synthesizer, you can never have the same sound twice on a synthesizer sometimes. These wonderful creations that it still needs the human touch to be able to create. That's the thing about it.
All music is based on technology. I mean, it's just based on the technology of its century. Yeah. So if you think about a violin, it's a piece of technology of its century. You guys are at Union Chapel, which has one of the most beautiful church organs in the world. Now that's a serious piece of technology. And ultimately what you end up with, you end up with the question, why did we need to go and build this piece of technology? And you suddenly find out that sound, music trumps words. There are things that we can say in sound. There are things that we can say that we must say in music that we just cannot say in words. And they seem to be important enough that somebody goes out and builds, develops a church organ, for instance, the one you're sitting very close to, which, was sort of perfected in the 17th century and wasn't beaten until a telephone exchange appeared in the 20th century. So there's something to these machines, to these bits of technology that let us, not just as musicians, communicate, but the communication that music has, or that sound has, and that is vital to us as human beings, is extraordinary.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but it's so refreshing and so nice to talk to three people who talk in perfect paragraphs. So thank you all very much. Thank you all very much for taking part in this conversation. And I, for one, can't wait to test drive my next BMW. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.